Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharya Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Samasta Janakalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahmavitvaram Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. We have reached towards the end of the section on Manomaya Kosha, and this Manomaya Kosha, this mind has to be purified. Intense identification with the Pranamaya Kosha and Annamaya Kosha, this mind becomes incredibly attached, and out of the attachment are born impurities, and these impurities are to be purified, and that is what is talked about over here in the next shloka 181. Tanmana shodhanam karyam prayatnena mumukshuna vishuddhe sati chaitasmin mukta kalapalayate. So this shloka comes and says, Tan mumukshuna, the students desirous of liberation, the students of Vedanta, the ones who are studying this textbook, having desire for liberation, prayatnena, with great effort, manaha shodhanam karyam kuru. The mind has to be purified. Manaha, mind. Shodhanam karyam, the purification of the mind with great diligence, with great effort. It has to be done. Karyam kuru. This karma has to be done. It should be done. It should be achieved. It should be one of our top priorities of purifying this mind. Mind having identified with limited pranamaya and annamaya kosha, what happens is the limited and changing nature of the Prakriti is what the mind owns up. Having owned up the limited nature of Prakriti to be continuous changing, it fears the changes, and the greatest fear it fears is the fear of death. This is what needs to be removed. That mind is none other than this pure divine absolute awareness consciousness, having identified with the limited pool, now has an identity of this Manomaya Kosha, and that is to be removed. And that Vishuddhi Sati Chaitanyasmin, and when the mind has been purified, when the mind has been completely purified, liberation becomes readily available, just like a fruit, gooseberry in the palm of our hands. Muktihi karaphalayatane, just like the fruit phala ayatane, the support of that is none other than our hands. As clearly as a gooseberry is seen in one's own hand, that easily mukti can be attained. But mukti depends upon the purification of the mind. So that is Vishuddhi Sati. This is Sati Saptami, meaning only when mind is purified, locative case. Sati, during that, when purified, only when purified, that mind is available for liberation. That is what is said. Now, we are coming to the end of Manomaya Kosha, and 4 steps to make this mind pure are highlighted over here. Mokshaika Saktya Vishayeshu Ragam Nirmulya Sanyasya Cha Sarva Karma Satshraddhaya Shravanadinishtaha Rajasvabhavam Sadunoti Buddhehe. So Yaha, he who is desirous of moksha, mumukshunadhi, from the previous shloka, by these mumukshus. So mokshaika saktya, with a single pointed attention on this desire for liberation, mokshaika saktya, with this single pointed surrender to the desire for liberation, Vishayeshu ragam nirmulya. Vishayeshu, sense objects, ragam, the attachment to the sense object, nirmulya, from the root itself, mula, root, from the very bud itself, remove the attachment to the sense objects, the mind which wanders in the very fertile fields of sense objects. These senses, when they roam about in these sense objects, it creates great impressions. These impressions are vasanas, and these vasanas are creating a sense of limitation in us. Not knowing our Purnananda Swarup, now we have identified with this limited objects, and the limited objects do not allow me to own up, to claim my absolute nature of Purnananda. So because of that, I get joy born out of Vishaya, Vishayananda. But the plight of the Vishayananda is it is temporal, it is time bound. And all objects are not available in all times, in all places, in all conditions. So it is dependent upon so many factors. And wherever there is a dependence on multiple factors, that mind cannot find Purna Ananda. And thus over here, Vishayeshu Ragam, like this, we have to continuously engage in our contemplation. Just by hearing Nirmulya Vishaya Ragam, Vishayeshu Ragam, but I have intellectually understood it. But nothing much happens if we do not follow up with contemplation. When we find whatever be our weakness, it could be sweet foods, it could be a TV show, it could be a movie, it could be traveling, whatever it may be. Each one of us, we know what our particular Vishaya Raga is. So whenever we come across that object of our perception, object of our senses, there and then we do the contemplation that my joy is dependent upon this object. Why am I allowing this joy of the temporal world, of the objective world, to cease my inner silence, my inner poise? This is called contemplation. Right where the object is hitting us, there and there is where this is to be done. Vishayeshu ragam nirmulya. And then sarva karma sanyasya, and renouncing all actions. Now this is a very, very tricky way of reading this. Sanyasya sarva karma bihi. On one hand, we are excited and happy. I don't have to do anything. That's very dangerous. That is not what is meant over here. Krishna has already mentioned in Gita that nahi kaschit shanamapi jatu tishtati akarmakrit karyate hyavashak karma sarva prakriti jair gunayehi. Not even for a moment we can abide without doing any actions. The gunas of the Prakriti are going to propel us into action. So what is meant by sanyasya sarva karma, what is meant is renounce all kamya karma. That is not explicitly said over here. Desire prompted actions are to be removed. Furthermore, nishiddha karma also is to be renounced. So, kamya karma, nishiddha karma, sanyasya. May one come to renounce that. But nitya karma, naimittika karma, prayaschitta karma, all of those have to be done without the sense of ownership. Knowing that this is my duty. Knowing that this karma is only my duty, I follow up with that karma and leave the rest. This is what is meant by sanyasya sarva karma. In this way, we have to supply this understanding. Then the next one is sat shraddhaya shravanadi nishtaha. The third instruction over here is with great faith. Sat shraddhaya, endowed with faith in this truth. Whatever the Shastra is declaring, whatever my Guru is declaring, whatever over here Acharya Shankaracharya ji has declared, Bhagavan Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, understanding that the Shastra has no ulterior motives in instructing me, except for my hita, my well-being. And my greatest well-being is liberation. If I want to come out of the bondages of this life, Number one, accept the teaching. I can only accept the teaching having faith in Shastra. Shastreshu Guruvakyeshu Satya Buddhi Avadharana Sa Shraddha Nigatyate. This definition we already saw where? In the same textbook, Vivekachudamani. In the earlier portion, Shankaracharya ji mentions this in the qualities of the spiritual student. With great faith in Shastra, I follow the instructions of the Shastra. I may have great faith, but if I don't follow up with the instructions, the faith is not complete. That is what it means. We have to strengthen our faith. Strengthening of the faith meaning, I will follow up with all that has been asked of me for my well-being, whether it be Shruti, Smriti, Puran, Itihas, Guru Vakya, whatever it is, I will follow up with it. When we do that, the mind becomes still, the mind becomes quiet, the mind becomes alert. Quiet, alert, vigilant is what Gurudev used to say. Because the mind is not carrying the load or the burden of vasanas. It is free of that burden. Instead, it has invested its well-being in Shastra. Thus, there is no weight on the shoulders. The mind is willing to be instructed. Shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapannam. Only when Arjuna utters these words, Bhagavan reveals the truth of Vedanta. Until then, Bhagavan also remains silent. Shastra dances in the courtyard of our mind when we have silence, the inner Rajo Guna, by investing in faith, and Sattva Guna dawns. Faith is an insignia of Sattva. From inside, the mind becomes silent. This Sat Shraddhaya Shravanadibhi hi nishthaha. May one find abidance in Shravanam. You know, when Sattva grows, when the Rajo Guna decreases, the pressure of the Vasana is lifted. The mind becomes light. Whatever we hear, it will be retained. Thus, the qualification for Shravanam is Sat Shraddhaya. Great faith in the truth which is declared by the teacher and the Shastra. Then, Rajaha Swabhavam Sadunoti Buddhehe. And just by doing this, the Rajas, whatever is heard, Shravanam, that Buddhi becomes subtler. The intellect becomes more and more subtle. What does more and more subtle mean? Meaning the Buddhi buddhi will have greater influence over the mind. Quiet the mind has become. Alert the mind has become for the instructions. Whose instructions? Buddhi. How did the buddhi get it? From Shravanam. How did Shravanam happen? Because of Shraddha. There is an expansion of buddhi. The expansion of the buddhi is known as subtlety of buddhi. And the orb of influence of this subtle buddhi is first and foremost mind. The mind becomes more and more divine, and rajasvabhavam saha, such a person, Dhunoti literally washes, purifies, cleanses. This buddhi takes bath in Shravanam. This is what happens. So these are the instructions, the 4 instructions for purifying the Manomaya Kosha. Having mokshaika asakti saktya vishayeshu ragam nirmulya, removing the attachment to the sense objects. Sarva kamya karma nishiddha karma sanyasya. May one come to renounce these two. But nitya naimittika karma, all of that has to continue. That is done with the surrender of this ego, what Bhagavan Krishna refers to as karma yoga. And such shraddhaya shravanadi nishtaha, abidance in listening to the Shastra. And this is the process of making the buddhi subtle, and rajas is removed from this buddhi. Again, 5 instructions are very beautifully are enumerated over here. What are they? Manomayo napi bhavet paratma ह्याद्यन्तवत्तात् परिणामी भावात् दुःखात्मनत्वात् विषयत्वहेतोः द्रष्टा हि दृश्यात्मतया न दृष्टः. So this is a summary of Manomaya Kosha. What is the Manomaya Kosha? 5 things are talked about over here. Manomayaha na api bhavet paratma. Mind is definitely not para atma. Paratma, the absolute, capital S self. Mind can never be Paramatma. Mind can never be absolute truth. Mind cannot be Brahman. Why? First one. Adi antavatvat. Mind has a beginning, it has madhyama, it has existence, anta, it comes to an end. Continuously we see the rise, the sustenance and the laya of mind. Jagrat avastha is the greatest example. The mind rises in the morning and remains throughout the whole day. And then when we go to bed, that mind is suspended. So it has a beginning, existence, it comes to an end. Every day there is an existence of mind. Even within the day, we can catch ourselves while even Shravanam is going on. Some thought may come and hijack our mind from this moment. We are supposed to be listening, but then we start thinking about all the chores that we have to do. all the tasks that need to be completed, and that mind wanders off, sitting, listening, yet far away from the two kriyas of sitting and listening. It is as though it has gone on a yatra of its own, prompted by various desires, various thoughts. So within Jagra Avastha, we lose ourselves, only to come back again and say, I lost myself, let me come back again. By that time, 2, 3, 4 minutes may have passed, and something we miss out on. So this happens adi antavatvat, parinama bhavat. Second, why is mind not Atma? Because it has a beginning and it has an end. Then parinama bhavat, it changes. We continuously change ourselves from childhood to adulthood, and as we age, we find ourselves continuously changing. We don't behave the same way we behaved when we were young. We don't behave the same way that we behaved when we were in our 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. As we age, the mind goes through vikara. What we liked previously, we don't like it anymore. What we did not like, all of a sudden we start liking. It's a change of the mind. Vikara. Continuous change. We see the mind change. And we even admit our changes. We say, I am not like what I used to be. By Shravanam and etc., we may have anger, we may have jealousy, we may have greed, and out of Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasan, when we truly work with ourselves, we can say, I'm not the kind of person I used to be. Just utter it to ourselves. So we can say, we can see our own change. Parinama bhavat, we change. Paramatma, on the other hand, is nitya, it doesn't have beginning, middle and end. Bhagavan doesn't keep on changing. It is nitya shuddha buddha mukta swarupaha. Eternally, it is pure. It never changes. But mind keeps on changing. Dukkha atmakatvat. It is of the nature of experiencing sorrow. The mind becomes heavily burdened with the ownership of the various karma phalas. And the greatest burden creating karma phala is dukkham. We become bogged down by sorrow. And if we allow the sorrowness to persist for a length of time, it is affecting us psychologically, and we can even say depression takes over the personality. There is no desire to do even nitya karma. Forget about kamya karma, nishiddha karma, they will drop off. Not out of sattva guna, but out of ghora tamas, born out of depression. Even nitya karma. So all of these things we have observed people go through, we ourselves may go through. So over here Shankaracharya ji says that because dukkha atmakatvat, and then vishayatva hetuhu, And it is, mind is Vishayatva Hetuhu. Buddhi can objectify even the quality of my mind. The quality of my mind is known to me. That is why I say that I am no longer an angry person, no longer a jealous person, etc., etc. When we compare ourselves to several years ago, who says this? The buddhi which has objectified the mind says that mind, you have become silent. Mind, you are free of anger. That is called over here Vishayatva Hetu. It is a cause of objectification. It itself objectifies the object, and it itself is objectified by buddhi. Amazing how even mind becomes a Vishaya. So, this is the fourth one. And then the last one, drashta hi drushya atmataya na drashtaha. It is seen as seen objects and has never been seen. So this subject, which is the self, it is the seer. This self can never ever be seen. And that mind can never reveal the seer. Thus, the mind is not the seer. These five, we have to really think about these. It looks very simple, but we have to really think about this. Why is Manomaya Kosha not Atma? Shankaracharya ji concludes that these are the five reasons that we saw throughout these last several shlokas. He says the mind has a beginning and an end, number one. Then mind is endowed with vikara, changes. Then mind is capable of affected by sorrow, dukkhatmakatvat. And then the mind, vishayatva hetuhu, the mind also is a cause for objectification, and the mind is also objectified by the buddhi. And the fifth one, the most important, mind objectifies everything except Atma. The seer, the absolute seer, the capital S, self, which is the silent seer, it sees, but it can never be seen. And that mind cannot reveal the inner seer. Because of these five things, Manomaya Kosha is a Koshaha. It is not Atma. It is simply some upadhi. And I am beyond this Manomaya Kosha. Now comes the next section over here. We end the Manomaya Kosha. The shloka 183, you can mark that, you can mark 182. Both of these shlokas are very good for contemplation. Recall these ideas when you go for a walk, when you're seated by a lake, when you go for a drive. Instead of listening to some music or something like that, it is very good idea to review these on a daily basis. O my mind, kastvam koham kuta ayat, etc., etc. O my mind, who are you? Where are you? What are you? At least what are you? This five we can, Shankaracharya ji reveals to us. This mind is not an Atma because of these reasons. Now, subtler than the Manomaya Kosha is Vijnanamaya Kosha. So Shankaracharya ji 84, 85, 86, 87, 88 in 5 shlokas he reveals this Vijnanamaya Kosha, the intellectual sheath over here. What is this intellectual sheath? Buddhir buddhindriyai sardam savrutti kartrulakshanaha Vijnanamaya Kosha Syat Pumsap Samsara Karanam. So, Buddhihi, intellect, Buddhi, Indriyaihi, the organs of perception. Buddhi, along with the organs of perception, Sardam, along with. Then, Savruttihi, along with the thought modifications. Vritti is this thought modification. The buddhi is the support of all these subtle thoughts. These vasanas, they manifest as very simple latent tendencies. And these tendencies spin into threads of ideas and thoughts. Just like, the cotton fiber, it is pulled from a little ball of cotton which is released by the cotton plant. And one little strand is removed and spun. That soft cotton which has seeds inside, and that cotton, when it is spun and turned into a thread, now this ball of cotton is turned into a thread. Same thing over here. These vasanas are spun into the thread-like thoughts. We call it vritti. And this vritti pravaha, there is a flow of these thoughts. That over here, savrittihi kartrulakshanaha. Kartrulakshanaha, it is of the nature of doer. Now, these vasanas, which were just a very fluffy ball of unmanifest, that has now become manifest as tantu, threads of ideas, of thoughts, vrittis. And these vrittis now, just like the thought, just like a thread is then spun into a fabric. In the same way, the tapestry of threads of ideas and thoughts, vrittis, they are spun into a tapestry of ownership, of doership. I own up these thoughts. And I claim, number one, my thought. my original idea. And when I ride the subtle wave of my thought, my idea, from there jumps the ahankar along with these very subtle tendencies, a desire to act upon it, saying, my thought is now put into motion, I'm going to act upon it. And that doership over here is talked about as kartru lakshanaha. It becomes an insignia, it becomes a lakshana for this doership. That is the birth of ahankar as doership. Vijnanamaya Kosha Syat Pumsaha Samsara Karanam. This very subtle ownership of thoughts and ideas, which the ego is going to grab and run with these ideas into the pluralistic world as karma, as actions. These actions now become the source of my bondage, that is called samsara karanam. It becomes a hetu, a cause, karanam for samsrutihi. Samsrutihi meaning the movement or the sliding into this world as arrival, being there, and then departure. Adi antavatvat. This is Vijnanamaya Kosha. It becomes a fodder for producing vrittis. It becomes a cause for these very subtle tantus, these threads. अनुव्रजच्चित् प्रतिबिम्बशक्तिः विज्ञानसंज्ञा प्रकृतेर्विकारः ज्ञानक्रियावानमहमित्यजस्त्रं देहेन्द्रियादिष्वभिमन्यते मृषम्. Pratibimba Shaktihi. Pratibimba. Bimba, the original source. Pratibimba, the reflection. This great reflection of this absolute when it takes in the pool of antakarana, in the inner equipment, the subtle body, the antakarana, in the shiny surface of the antakarana, when the light of awareness, consciousness over here, chit pratibimba, chit meaning consciousness, the very original chit, Chaitanya consciousness, when it shines upon the antakarana, a reflection takes place, and that reflection is called pratibimba. And that pratibimba over here, Shakti, it has power. It is not just some reflection that we see of the sunlight on the wall because of the presence of a stainless steel plate or a bucket or whatever it may be. This pratibimba has some extraordinary power. It is Shaktihi Anuvrajati. Anuvrajat, this Chaitanya Shakti endowed with the power of having sparsha of the original, which creates this reflection. This reflection cannot exist without the absolute. So the absolute, by the very presence of the absolute, this reflection takes place and that reflection has power, endowed with the reflection and the power, what happens? Vijnana Sanyaha. Vijnana Sanyaha, this intellectual sheath, this happens in the very inner core of buddhi. It is effortless. Continuously it is happening. Even before our arrival onto this planet in our mother's womb, the Jivatma was, the Jivatma was, the Jivatma then comes out, born, and continuously the vikar of the Jivatma goes on until Vinashyati, this Chit Shakti remains over here with the Jiva, and its source is the very inner chambers of Buddhi. There, in this Vijnana Sanyaha, known as the intellectual sheath, the very inner core, Prakrutehe Vikaraha, it is the very modification of Prakriti, the very subtle unmanifest from which this inexplicable power bounces off. This is a power of Prakriti in the very deep chambers of Buddhi, and Jnana Kriyavan aham iti ajastram deha indriyeshu abhimanyate mrusham. Deha indriyeshu, in the body and the senses, abhimanyate, that person identified with, mrusham, completely identified with, jnana kriyavan. The identification now creates jnana kriyavan, endowed with the knowledge of the know-abouts of how to act upon the particular thought, and having an understanding of how to act upon it. This Jnana Kriyavan aham iti ajastram, I am this individual. It always rides this wave of identification of the equipment. But the source of this identification, it effortlessly happens in the inner sacred chambers of Vijnanamaya Kosha, where the vritti is ignited by the power of Chit Shakti, and that Chit Shakti then identifies with Manomaya along with Deha Indriya and all of it, and everything that comes along with it. We saw at great length Annamaya Kosha, at great length Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, and now the very source of the identification, the ignition which happens in this engine of Jeeva, is in the secretive deeper chambers of Vijnanamaya Kosha, where these vrittis are put to illumination by none other than this Prakriti itself, Prakriti Vikaraha. And in this way, the mighty power of this eternal consciousness now rides the Jivatva. And this is how the spark of life, the reflection of it, Pratibimba, Now over here, Deha Indriya Adishu Abhimanyate. It identifies with it. Abhimanyate. Ahamiti. I am that. Not realizing my source is Kevala Chaitanya. I am awareness. That it renounces, and now it says, I am this thought. I am this mind. I am this body. This object is mine, etc. Aham mama iti. All of this comes out. And this Jeeva is bound in this cocoon of Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, and the Vijnanamaya Kosha, where these vrittis spring forth. All of this now torments this Jeeva, which is Pratibimba, a reflection. And now the reflection is tortured by each one of these koshas. One by one, they add a layer of limitedness, each one of them paralyzing that poor Jiva, which is pure Chaitanya. Continuing, Anadikaloyamaham svabhavaha Jiva samastavyavara vahara vodha karotu karmanyapi purva vasanaha punyanya punyani chatat phalani. So then over here it is said ayam aham swabhavaha, this aham swabhavaha of the nature of ego, anadikal jivaha, this is the jivatma, ayam aham swabhavaha jivaha. What is this jiva? Aham swabhavaha, I am this thought, I am this idea, etc. Anadikalaha, it is there from the beginningless time. Anadikalaha samasta vyavahara vodhaha, it carries out the activities born out of the identification with this limited equipment. Samasta vyavahara vodhaha, vodha, it carries out all these activities. And then karoti karmani, it does karmas, it engages in doing purva vasanaha, born out of the past vasanas. And what are the past vasanas? Punya apunyani chatat phalani. And these vasanas are categorized as good and bad, right and wrong, etc., etc. Just in the two boxes. Over here, Shankaracharya ji takes it as the punya, apunya, good and evil thoughts. Punya, apunyani, chatat phalani, and the fruits born there out of, the results born out of that. Bhungte vichitra swapiyo nishu vrajan nanya Nayati niryatyad urdvameshaha astyaiva vijnanamayasya jagrat swapnavat swapnadyavasthasu sukha dukkha bhogaha. So then what happens? This punya apunya chatat phalani. Then what? Continuing, it says bhungte, it enjoys. It enjoys these fruits born out of good and evil tendencies. Purva vasanaha, vasanas of the past, accumulated, anadikala vasanas accumulated, vichitra, all this vichitrasu, in these various api yonishu, so many wombs we have taken, from the ant, the cockroach, the worm, just goes on and on and on. Animals and birds and plant kingdom, so many different wombs we have taken. Bhungte, it enjoys. Vichitra, vichitrasu api yonishu vrajan, it moves about from this womb to that womb, this birth to that birth, this life to that life. Continuously it goes, moves about, moves about, moves about. So many births it goes through. Nayati niryati. So, ayati niryati, sorry. Ayati, it comes. Niryati, it goes. It comes and goes in various birds, going up and down. And adaha urdhvam, going into the higher wombs or going into the lower wombs. Adaha urdhvam cha eshaha. Then asya eshaha asya eva vijnanamayasya, this alone is this vijnanamaya, asya eva vijnanamayasya jagrat swapna. Jagrat, the waking, swapnadi, the dream, etc. Avasthasu, all these various states. Sukha dukkha bhogaha, it enjoys these joys and sorrows. Where is this Shankaracharya ji bringing it from? Kaivalya Upanishad. Swapne sa jiva sukha dukkha bhokta swamayaya kalpita jiva loke shushupti kale sakale viline tamo vibhuta sukharupameti punascha janmantara karma yogat, etc., etc. All of this, the proof of this is where it is in Kaivalya Upanishad. This entire Samsruti is talked about over there. This is this Puratraya Kridati Yastu Jivaha. This Jiva plays about in these three cities. With three cities, Jagrat, Swapna, Shushupti. Bhagavan Shivji has destroyed, Tripurari, he's called, the enemy of the three cities. And then, this demon is living in all these cities. Actually, these are the three cities. The Purana talks about, this iron city and bronze city and gold city, etc., etc. All of these things are there. But the actual three cities, Puratraya Kridati Yastu Jivaha, and born out of them Vichitra Bhogan, different types of joys and sorrows. Over here, going in the higher wombs, the joys are subtler. In the lower wounds, it is gross joys. Even then, the jiva doesn't get exhausted by enjoying these sukha and dukkha. The jiva asks for even more and more births. Even then, the jiva doesn't realize, for how long will I go on? How long? Raman Maharshi ji comes and says, Manasam tu kim iti margane krute naiva manasam marga arjava. Oh my mind, how long? Who are you? And we put an end to it. This inquiry brings an end to all this talked about over here. We will continue in our next class. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaः, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.